Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Trending Topics podcast. My name is Julia Gerber. Before we begin, here's a brief word from our sponsor.
Du willst einfach und sicher Bitcoin kaufen? Dann check mal 21 Bitcoin aus. Ob Sofortkauf, Sparplan oder Limit Order, bei 21 Bitcoin ist das alles möglich. Und das Beste, die Volksbank Raiffeisenbank Bayern Mitte steht hinter 21 Bitcoin als strategischer Partner. Das bedeutet, dass deine Einzahlungen auf einem sicheren Treuhand-Bankkonto landen. Alle, die ihre Bitcoins am liebsten selbst verwahren, können sie sich ganz einfach an die eigene Wallet senden. Und die Gebühren, die starten schon bei ziemlich niedrigen 0,79%. Falls du in Österreich bist, 21 Bitcoin ist für dich steuereinfach und als Sahnehäubchen obendrauf gibt es eine Partnerschaft mit dem FC Red Bull Salzburg. Alle weiteren Infos unter www.21bitcoin.app oder direkt in den App Stores.
Today I am speaking with two founders from the tech scene, Markus Keiblinger and Alexander de Pauw. Together with 4 other co-founders, they established the Vienna-based startup Texterous and are dedicated to customized AI. This means they focus on tailored applications using artificial intelligence. And by the way, the 6 co-founders were already engaged with AI before the ChatGPT boom in November 2022. Markus and Alexander will tell us now what Texterous does exactly and where their AI journey is heading. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
I already mentioned in the introduction that you were engaged with AI even before founding Texterous. How did that come and how did your 6-person team come together?
So initially we had some people on the team that were already engaged with also academic research in that area, mainly Stefan and Thomas through their university experience. And they got access to the API from OpenAI quite early. So they were actually among the first 6,000 people worldwide that got research access to that. And they actually also wrote a paper together on applications of those language models in a business sense. And then basically they told me about it also while I was still studying that there's this little startup that created something quite interesting there. They knew I was also interested in technology. And they encouraged me to also apply to get on the wait list to do some early research with the API. So they first applied in, I think, August 2020, and then got access back in October 2020. And then we kind of started playing around with the tool. Back then it was quite different. You didn't have a chat interface. It was really just language completion. So you had an input field and you would have an output field, and the output field would just continue the text in the input. And you could even back then somehow mimic a chat interface by basically taking the output and copying back into the input field, but also the context windows, so how much text you can put in and get out, were really quite limited. But at the same time, we could see that there's quite a lot of potential in the technology. And so we started looking into it, what you can do with it. Like I said, they also did research on that. And we saw that this technology can be applied in a quite wide range of areas. And maybe as a little side note, we actually, as more of a fun project, even wrote one of the first AI-generated books with it, back with one of the earlier models. And basically formed a group of people that were interested in technology. And then initially, we actually had a platform that was intended to allow people to create simple, very basic applications that can help them everyday life.
Before you tell us about the SaaS-platform, at what universities did you study? And then also you are a quite international team, right?
Yeah, so we were international right from the start. So Thomas and Stefan, they met while studying at Maastricht University. I studied at UCL in London. And then we had other team members like Alex, for example, who also studied in the Netherlands at TU Eindhoven, and Olivier as well, also TU Eindhoven. So we kind of also met through this university affiliation, I would say, in a way.
It started mostly because I did my bachelor's at Maastricht University, where I met 2 of the other co-founders, Thomas and Stefan. And we had a course together, and we started working on one project which already involved AI. but was very basic and was mostly generating emails from bullet points. And this was way back in 2019, 2020. And then after this, we lost a bit touch. But then Thomas came up with this idea and contacted me, and we basically formed a team. So Thomas brought along Markus and other people from Austria mostly, and I brought along some people from my master's, which was a master in artificial intelligence and engineering systems at the TU Technical University in Eindhoven, such as me, myself, and Olivier, another co-founder of ours.
That's a really cool founding story. And then you initially started off with your SaaS platform. And then there was a shift towards more customized AI solutions. How did that happen?
So we set up the platform at first. We had some first test customers. It was also not really mainly B2B. It was actually primarily probably a B2C platform. We got some first results from people who tried it out, but then we thought, okay, to really validate this and get a wider user base, we probably need some funding, but none of us had experience with public grants and also not with investors. Actually, that happened at the same time when then ChatGPT came around. And then suddenly we had a massive hype around the topic, which to us was a bit surprising because, like I said, we had a lot of those capabilities of those models even 2-3 years beforehand, although maybe some capabilities were not there yet. But to us, it wasn't really such a major jump that would allow for such a massive jump in the hype around it. But we benefited from that because then we actually had companies reach out to us. So we are in quite close contact with also the universities. Like we organized events together where we just talk about the technology in general and what we also develop with it. And then companies actually came up to us directly, asking us and saying, okay, what you're doing here is quite interesting. We also have some problems there. Could you maybe build something for us? And then our thought was to actually do projects for companies to kind of do a cross financing to get money from the project and use that to fund our own product. So we started doing this, and it kind of ended up being our main business model without that being really a strategic decision. However, looking back, it turned out to be a very good one because a lot of the capabilities that our SaaS platform had back in the day would have been very hard to compete with now, because a lot of those capabilities you can now cover with tools like, for example, custom GPTs. So that's how we ended up in that direction. But now we're also considering, or actually are planning to go back to more scalable solutions again.
Yeah, you will tell us more about that later, I hope. So with the takeoff of ChatGPT, your business started rolling, basically.
Yeah, so really we did the first actual projects after some pilots in October last year. So actually not a very long time. But since then I've worked with quite a range of companies, also different industries, different sizes of companies. We've worked with startups, we've worked with corporates, with massive organizations as well, some of the biggest in the world, and also with government organizations, and really had a range of experience that we could collect. And I would say, in a way, what we did the past year to us was really like a real world business laboratory. We could test out different solutions. We could help companies experiment with solutions because a lot of the things that we've built in the past year were really a early stage version of possible tools, and to help those organizations discover what is possible with AI solutions. And then later on, we saw that some of them actually came back and said, okay, this is quite interesting. We want to even develop it further.
That's super interesting. Alexander, you are an AI system engineer. What tasks are involved here, and what are your responsibilities at Texterous?
So AI system engineer as a position is quite broad and quite high level in my case because of Texterous being a startup. So quite limited amount of people. So obviously we have quite a lot of people being busy with most tasks. So in this case, I also embody the role of sales, for example, or talking to clients, even if that's not the primary role of an AI systems engineer. But I also, as more general roles or duties of an AI system engineer, I also code and implement the solutions. And this involves mostly creating the general architecture around the AI, because the AI is a tool and one piece of the puzzle in these applications, but there's a lot of other pieces that go around it, and a lot of information that you need to feed the AI, that you have to train the AI on these large language models, and to create a correct output, and then also deliver this to the users in a proper way. And so it's everything that interacts with the AI model. So on a higher level, you could say an AI system engineer encompasses most of those roles. And on top of that, I do also client exchanges, and it's really nice. And clients are usually really happy because the chain of people to talk to is very short. Like, I do client meetings and then I implement the solutions. So there's not a lot lost in translation, which is actually very good and is very effective for this. So yeah, quite a general role.
Okay, you mean because you're talking directly to the clients and they can tell you what you want, and then you are translating it into a technical way, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I do the finding the client, the talking to clients at events and so on, and then the selling to them. So in a call, telling them what we offer, what their problem is, how we can make a solution for that. And then once they agree, I go and actually implement this solution with our team, and then just I have regular checkups with the clients to see if they enjoy the solution or how it's going. And technically, obviously, coding wise, we build this architecture. We have to make all the pieces in the puzzle work together and interact, like the AI model, but also the front end, so what the user sees, and the back end, which makes the computation. And there's a lot of security as well involved in this process, obviously, because we also use confidential data, and that's one of our main pluses. So it's about just doing coding every single part and making sure it works, but also that the overall system satisfies certain requirements of the client, and just talking to clients, yeah, as well.
Super. So I think now we need some kind of examples. What AI solutions have you already developed for your customers?
So we've made a wide range of solutions, as Marcus mentioned previously. We've worked in a lot of different sectors: the government sector, the consultancy sector, the healthcare sector, the education sector. And one example that I can give is Ella, which is a tool that we built for the education sector. And the problem with the education sector in the Netherlands, for example, is that, or all around the world, is that more people have to be educated, and more people have to be educated in more of a customized way, or a more, let's say there's more people that have to be educated and maybe less people that want to educate. So there's less availability of teachers have less time because maybe people don't want to be teachers anymore, or let's say there's a shortage of teachers and there's a lot of students that have to be educated. And the problem is that there's a lot of information, obviously, that the companies that are overarching these schools, that have all the data about, hey, this is a book of biology, this is a book of chemistry, and they have all these big databases with all this educational information. But you cannot expect a teacher, which are already in shortage, to browse through all these knowledge and create a perfect lessons for their students. And so what you see is, over the years, the teachers keep on using maybe the same lesson, and that becomes very outdated. So that was a bit the problem. And our solution for that was to take all these big databases with all this educational information and give that to an AI. So make an AI study this and know this. And so that a teacher was able to chat with an AI and say, for example, hey, I have a class of fourth grade students, and I want to make a lesson of 15 minutes about this biology topic. And I want it to be structured in first a little presentation and then a little interactive game between them. And our tool would return an entire plan for the lesson, with also additionally all the information from this database, which had all this educational information, and also basically the link and the references to this set database, which is, for example, also a current limitation of ChatGPT, which doesn't return exactly the information where it gets everything from. And so this also proves that the system works because it gets the information from these trusted sources. And so this makes the work of the teacher actually way smoother and way nicer because they can interact. And this can be done we did this with not only, for example, PDF or Word documents, but also with podcasts, videos, and so on. It's all transcribable and then can all be used in our system as well.
Okay, that's a perfect example of customized AI, I would say. And Markus, there is another company you're developing a project for, right? In the health tech sector, about that you are super excited. Do you want to share some details about that?
We can't go into too much detail because it's still ongoing, but essentially we want to support the healthcare industry, or more specifically, initially the focus would be on GPs, general practitioners. As we all know, we have a shortage of people in healthcare, but even more pressing within general practitioners. Something that is not really a big topic in Austria yet is telemedicine. There are some private insurances that offer this. Also recently, I learned that actually the public insurance has already created the possibility for this, and even with an option for doctors to get reimbursed for telemedicine, but it's still not really widely in use. However, in the Netherlands, it's quite more common. They already use this. There are already companies that also manage patient data. And so we're now in the Netherlands trialing a tool that can support GPs with replying, or basically finding information, finding relevant information, and then preparing or supporting them in preparing answers to those requests.
Yeah, I have the feeling when it comes to technology, sometimes the Netherlands are a bit more advanced than Austria. Would you confirm that?
I think it might also be a cultural thing. A general feeling that I get is that in Austria, we often have the mentality of, things always used to work, it's working right now, we don't really need to do something now. We can still wait. Whereas in the Netherlands, I think they're more open to experimenting and trying things out.
Would you confirm that, Alexander?
Yeah, I think I would agree. And I don't know, obviously, what the situation is in Austria, but in the Netherlands, they have the same problem with shortage of general practitioners and a lot of demand for healthcare and so on. So, an aging population. So the pressure really goes onto these GPs that are the front line, let's say, of the medical roadmap that you have to follow. You first go to your GP, and then only you can go to a hospital or get a test or something like that. So they're really the first line. And with the aging population and obviously less GPs for more people, it's really necessary to indeed switch to this type of more innovative solutions and more efficient solutions. And I'm not sure what the situation is in Austria, but definitely the Netherlands like to experiment with new technology, and indeed is quite at the forefront of this.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so now we heard two amazing examples about how you use customized AI in projects. What is the mission of Texterous, and how do you differentiate yourself from other AI startups?
So in both of those examples, what you've seen is there is kind of the problem itself is derived from changes in population, I would say, and like general trends within society. So there's two really big trends also on a European level. If you look at our population pyramid, last time I checked it, I think it was a year ago, so it might not be that current anymore, but roughly we have in the age group of the current 35-year-olds about 8 million people, and in the age group of the current 15-year-olds, so in that birth year, around 6 million, which is quite a big drop-off, which means there's a lot less people. And then at the same time, our productivity growth is slowing. So we're still getting more productive, but at a slower rate. But what that means is that people feel that they're relatively over their lifetime getting wealthier slower. And also this gap in generations putting a lot of pressure on young people, like in the pension system, like in healthcare and so on, to support this. And there's another dangerous or very concerning effect of this. Once people realize that those two factors really mean or that we're just by themselves would be looking at a very bleak economic future, they start to get concerned, start to look for solutions, start to look for also someone to blame, which can lead to instability within countries, but can also lead to conflicts within or between countries. We want to preserve a prosperous and peaceful Europe. I think that's quite a strong why. And then you have a third trend, which is AI and machine learning tools and generally digitalization and automation. And I think with some of the progress we've made recently and also what we believe is still to come, that is one of the things where we have a chance to actually make a jump in productivity. Because, well, if you look at the two problems, the first one will be very, very difficult to tackle. Even if the population starts growing a lot faster now, if we have more children, there will be quite a big delay of around 20 years until those people enter the workforce. And you could also try to compensate it a little bit with migration, like from outside of Europe. But it will be very difficult to do it by those ways alone. So our aim is to focus on the second thing, on the productivity, and make some progress there. And we're doing that with our company by enabling organizations to do that better, because we believe if we focus on bigger organizations especially, we can have more of a direct impact, because you reach the people in work who use those tools to be more productive and to directly work on this problem. And we've actually also founded a community of people who are interested in AI and want to work with these tools. It's called AIM. It's AI Impact Mission, which essentially wants to bring together different stakeholders that can make a difference there. So you have the people in research and in the academic area who oftentimes their research doesn't really end up anywhere. They might work really hard on it, might actually get it published, but then oftentimes it just ends up in a drawer collecting dust. And doesn't really get applied in the real world. Then you have founders and young people who want to work with new technologies. You have corporates who want to try to stay innovative. You have governments who also want to work on these issues. And I think by bringing all of these people together in some form of community, a lot of good things can happen, which go beyond what we can do just as a company.
Mm-hmm. That's also what you meant by focusing on more scalable solutions, right? That this is something that you want to follow up in the future.
I would say that's part of it, because, of course, if you are able to develop a solution that you can apply more broadly, it's easier to replicate to other companies and to have a greater impact with that.
If I can add something about the mission to keep it a little bit more concise, just I think our mission really as a company is to breach the gap between what we see in research and industry, because we see these big research companies like OpenAI going super fast, coming out with all types of new models, tools, software. But we see that once you get into industry, people are indeed really backwards and have a system that works and don't want to change it or innovate it. So we really try and breach this gap and teach these people how to use it. And the second point is also to make AI, so this technology, more accessible, but especially understandable, because a lot of people or companies like this think that, oh, I have a problem, AI will solve it. And it's not always the case. And so we try and steer them in this new landscape of, hey, and in this big image that they have in their head of, hey, AI can solve everything. That's not necessarily true. AI also has limitations. And that's where we're trying to just help them with.
Now I have to ask you the big data question. How do you secure that your customers' data is safe when it comes to hosting, but also, of course, to data protection?
So first of all, there's quite some distinction, because, for example, if you treat, for example, educational data, for example, in the Ella implementation that we made that I talked about before, there the security of the data was not a primary concern, in the sense it's data that is quite available generally online and quite general knowledge. Or maybe not, but it's not a huge problem if it gets, let's say, leaked, or if someone...
Okay, but for others it is, I guess.
Yeah, no. For others, indeed, we work with maybe healthcare, in the healthcare sector or in the government sector, and their data is, the sensitivity of the data is a priority. And there's quite a lot of ways of ensuring this data security, which depends again on what the client prefers, because all these models, this AI part can also be downloaded and run locally, for example, so which would absolutely restricted from the net, and you can use this solution without even having internet, for example, which would make your data extremely secure. Another way would be to just run it on local servers or servers that are located in the country, which this is also available on hosting platforms like Microsoft Azure, for example. They have hosting services, and you can choose where your hosting is happening. So this ensures you that, for example, the data stays in one country. And what we can see also in industry, what we found out is that companies already have all their data in these big cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure, and therefore using that, using their environment to make these models and these tools is actually perfect, because we don't move the data around; we just keep it in their environment. And if they already trust these platforms with their data starting out with, then we can basically just build on top of that. And so that is some of the solutions we find in the case where the data is very sensitive. And obviously we use all type of other encryption and so on when using, for example, a front end or something like that. But that's the general idea. But then also, for example, for the one very nice thing that we did for our healthcare solution is that before any data was made available to the AI, it was already cleaned and anonymized. So even we take all the precautions, but even if that wouldn't be enough, the anonymization and cleaning of it should really do help a lot and remove, all names, dates, anything that might be sensitive.
Okay, so the data should be safe, you're saying. Is it possible to mention some of your clients' names so we can imagine for whom you're doing projects?
We have Medtronic, for example, who are like manufacturing also tools in the healthcare industry. We've worked with universities, for example, University of Maastricht. We've worked with also in the media industry, with, for example, the Wiener Zeitung. Yeah, maybe Alex, you can talk about some more of the people also in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I mean, we can mention names. I don't know if it's gonna ring a bell or not, but we've worked with, for example, GITP. They take care of making tests. When you hire someone new, they have to go through some kind of tests to give a better overview of their personality and their skills to the employer. And we worked with such a company. We've worked for a consulting company called Gupta as well. We've worked with the educational company for Ella, and they were called the Management Group. So that's a little bit of the names of some companies we've worked with.
A lot of different industries, right? Wouldn't it be easier if you focused on just one or two industries?
I mean, yes and no. So generally, the structure that we use for those systems doesn't really change that much from industry to industry. But also, like we've mentioned before, yes, it would make sense to have more specialized tools that are more scalable, and for that, you would then need to focus on industry. Yes.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's also we are like starting out, so we're still a startup, growing, but still a startup, and we are exploring a little bit the landscape. And I think the fact of working in so many industries gave us an incredible idea of actually what are the fundamental problems that are happening across the AI landscape. And I think that is a very good thing that we have now when we go do workshops or try and explain things to clients. It's way easier because we know what everyone has as a ground problem. And indeed, we want to try and focus maybe on a specific industry, but we're keeping options open. And then when something sticks and something actually turns out to be good and we see a big future in it, or we get, for example, funding for it or something like that, then we will focus and specialize. But we don't want to specialize too early and maybe run into the problem of maybe actually that's not something people need, or it's not something that's going to be used. So we're basically following leads and seeing where it's our roadmap, or where time takes us, let's say.
Mhm. That's interesting because that means you right now you cannot say in which areas you see the greatest opportunities for the use of AI, or can you?
I mean, now we have a hint in this moment in time, which is in healthcare. We're having quite some success there and quite some funding also on that side. So that is a hint, but we don't want to say anything for sure until until this is developed and so on. But That is, I think, a good anywhere technically where there's a shortage or where a process can be made more efficient. But let's not forget that in this pipeline, an expert still has to be there. That's also a big thing that people say, okay, I'm just going to replace people with AI. That's not what I think. I think the expert still has to be there to keep the quality and to keep to not have anyone liable for the system, because AI can make mistakes, but at least you make the life of this expert way more easy and efficient by implementing these solutions.
Yeah, also startups in general need to stay as flexible as possible, and even more so in if you're working in a field that's so rapidly developing as it is the case with AI right now. So we want to stay very flexible, be able to work with different industries, and we do also plan to continue doing some of these projects while developing our scalable solutions further, just to keep this flexibility.
So now we reach the last question. What advantages do customized AI solutions bring to companies, especially when we compare them to so many universal AI products that are currently out there on the market? Maybe you can also briefly explain the difference between like a ChatGPT based AI product and your solutions.
So the difference, I would say, is mainly with very big players like OpenAI. Their mission is to make the best fitting solution for the greatest amount of people. But that is not necessarily the best fit for everyone, first of all. And secondly, it's a lot of companies are banning this because of data security reasons. And so there's quite a big opportunity where we see, okay, these big companies are doing that, and we are going to advise and build or use this research and these findings to basically help companies that either are worried about data security or want a more tailored type of application, so a more really personalized also user interface, or with some feedback or a specific way of making the database when the information came from. So it's not that we're not OpenAI based company. We also they have really good models, and that can also be the backbone of our applications. But I think where we differentiate ourselves from the big players is really about being there next to the client and talking to them and helping them on their specific problem and seeing how we can solve this, even if it's just basically consulting them on how to use these tools that OpenAI proposes, because that's also not, if you don't know about the technology, you're not an expert in it and you might find it problematic. Compared to other smaller, let's say, AI consultancies, maybe we work very fast as we are quite small. Yeah, we try and just get clients and make them very satisfied, and then keep on reaching out like this. So we have not met a very, very large amount of companies that do what we do, because most of them focus on maybe a small SaaS application or more about drag and drop of like pieces of application that in the end make a bigger application. We really focus on really customizable and also just taking the client on this journey of like, okay, what is your problem? We're going to help you. We're going to explain to you what this is all about. And we are quite expert in the fields by now. So that's usually very, very highly appreciated.
So in other words, the big players can never be that specialized.
I don't believe so, because already one of the big problems is just that now companies cannot use ChatGPT just because of it being banned. Which is already one big thing against the big players. And they can indeed not be extremely specialized, because you can, for example, try and make a GPT, which is a small application of ChatGPT, which you can give more instructions to and more data to. But there is, for example, a limit of like 20 files that you can upload. But maybe if a company has way more files, that's not a viable solution. So you have to make a separate version of this. It's very user friendly, let's say, but even for companies that really want to have this integrated in their systems, it's they need someone specialized with, let's say, the API of a model, and also the infrastructure behind and the hosting behind, and basically the whole package. Because it's just a nice interface, is nice for day to day, but if you want to integrate it in actually a production process, then you need something slightly different than this kind of tool. Yes.
I think it can also help people to think of this as an ecosystem, like similar to the internet, where you have different layers of the internet. You have this low level, which are kind of the foundation models that are tools that you can use to build upon. Yes, OpenAI also offers products like ChatGPT and like the customized GPTs, but then the real benefit that you get as a company, especially for large organizations, like Alex said, is you take this base layer technology, you take the language model through the API. You might use you might have your own model. You might use open source models. You might then fine tune them. But you use this basic layer, and then where the real value comes in is one level above, is where you actually integrate it with other tools and you build on top of it and you layer it on top of each other. And what we do is we help people bring this base layer into action by combining it with their own data, by combining it with a huge database that they might already have.
Okay, those are some really interesting insights. And that's it for today's Trending Topics Tech Talk. Thank you, Markus and Alexander, for sharing your mission and vision of Texterous.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating and follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and other platforms. If you have any feedback, comments, or suggestions for guests you'd like to hear on the show, feel free to reach out to us. Bye, and we will talk soon.